All right, welcome back to the Roundup. So glad you could join us. And hey, if you're checking out the new video format on Spotify or YouTube for the first time, awesome. It's a bit of a big day here. The first snow of the season has started falling. And, that kind of feels fitting given the flurry of news we've had this week.
Yeah, just like the snow, there has been an absolute flurry of activity in the research security world. So let's get right into it, and we're going to start with some pretty big money moves happening up in Ottawa.
Okay, so the big news this week was Federal Budget 2025, and they made some massive promises, really all about attracting global talent and juicing up our tech sectors. It's pretty clear the government is placing a huge bet on brain power to get ahead, especially with how competitive things are globally right now.
And when I say huge bet, I mean it. The headline number here is, wow, $1.7 billion, all for a new international talent attraction strategy. The idea, or at least the stated goal, is to use that cash to bring in over 1,000 of the best international researchers and really beef up our research infrastructure.
But, and there's always a but, right? Here's the catch. The folks in post-secondary education, they're having some really mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, they're like, great, fast-track immigration, more funding, we love it. But on the other hand, they're sounding some serious alarms. We're talking about major cuts to international student permits, and they're worried this could absolutely gut university programs and really tarnish Canada's reputation as a place to come and study.
And it's not just about people. The budget also doubles down on our high-tech future, specifically AI and quantum computing. We're looking at over $1 billion being poured into this space. A huge chunk of that is for building our own sovereign AI infrastructure. This is a really clear signal that Canada wants to be a major player in the global tech race, not just sitting on the sidelines. So while all that's happening, there's a completely different kind of storm brewing right here in our own research community. It's kind of ironic, as the government is trying to pull new talent in, over 5,000 of our own researchers are pushing back hard against a parliamentary order for what they're calling a massive data dump.
So what's this about? Well, they're being told to hand over 25 years' worth of grant applicant data. And we're talking sensitive personal information here. The researchers are basically saying, no way, this is invasive, it's unethical. They're arguing it could totally undermine academic freedom and even put marginalized scholars at risk. This is a huge clash, really, over privacy, politics, and the fundamental trust we have in our research institutions.
And this whole internal fight over data and trust, it's happening at the exact same moment Canada is trying to flex its muscles on the world stage. So you have to ask, right? How does all of this, the big spending, the talent strategy, this friction at home, how does it all fit into the bigger global picture? How do we really stack up against our friends and our rivals?
Okay, let's look at that. This is where it gets really interesting because you see a real contrast here. You've got Canada and the US just pouring hundreds of millions into AI and quantum, but then you look over at the European Union and they seem to be struggling. Researchers over there are saying that the funding calls are basically obsolete by the time the money actually comes through. And in a field that moves as fast as AI, that is a huge problem.
And this really shows something important, doesn't it? This whole race for innovation, it's not just about who has the biggest wallet. You're seeing these unexpected hubs just pop up. I mean, who would have guessed Crete? But yeah, it's quietly becoming this key center for European space innovation. They're hosting big conferences, using their local research scene. It's pretty cool.
But not everyone's playing the same game. Some places are taking a totally different approach. Over in Asia, for instance, a lot of universities are focusing less on just raw funding and more on creating inclusive policies, targeted scholarships, basically making a really diverse and welcoming place for international students. It's a completely different way to think about attracting the world's best talent. And this all leads us to the really sharp end of the stick when it comes to research security. This is where that idea of open global collaboration just slams right into national security. And that's when you have to start drawing some really tough lines in the sand, geopolitically speaking. And we are absolutely seeing this play out right here in Canada. The trial of Yusheng Wang, a former researcher at Hydro-Quebec, is happening right now. The Crown's case is that he was committing economic espionage for China. But his defense? They're painting a completely different picture. That he was just a frustrated employee looking for a new job and that any information he had was already public. Yeah, Wang actually testified that he was totally shocked by his arrest. He's sticking to his story that it was professional frustration, not espionage, that made him look for other jobs, and he's flat out denying all the charges. This whole case, man, it really shows you just how thin that line can be between someone's career ambitions and what the state considers a national security risk.
If you want a less subtle example, just look at what happened in the UK. This one is pretty stark. We have documents showing this sustained pressure campaign against Sheffield Hallam University. We're talking staff in China being threatened, the university's websites being blocked, and all of it was to shut down research on human rights abuses. And the craziest part? The university actually caved at first, but then had to backtrack after a huge public outcry.
So you can see this incredible tension building up all across the West. How do you do it? How do you protect academic freedom and the integrity of your research from this kind of blatant interference, without just building walls so high that you suffocate the very international collaboration that science needs to thrive? That's the million-dollar question, and you can bet leaders in Brussels are trying to figure it out right now.
And at the exact same time, what we even mean by national security risk is getting broader. China's Ministry of State Security just came out and said its grain and seed sector is a key strategic asset. They're warning that foreign spies targeting their agricultural data is a direct threat to the nation. Think about that. Food security is now national security.
Okay, so with all these challenges flying around, funding battles, foreign interference, you name it, what's actually being done? What are the real, concrete steps being taken to build a more secure, more resilient future for research and innovation?
Well, let's start with a really fantastic story coming out of Quebec. Polytechnique Montreal has this brilliant pilot project going. They're training students to become cybersecurity experts, and then these students go out and do free security audits for nonprofits. You know, the very organizations that are often the most vulnerable to cyber attacks. It's a total win-win. Then, if we look out west, Manitoba is making this really bold move for something called data sovereignty. So what does that mean? Basically, they want to make sure that data from Manitoba and from Canada is stored on Canadian soil and subject to our laws. It's a real push for digital independence from the big tech giants and foreign governments, and the idea is it boosts both security and freedom of expression.
But as we're building all these new systems, there's a problem. A pretty shocking new review just found massive flaws in how we're even testing AI for safety. They looked at over 400 benchmarks and found that only 16%, seriously, just 16%, use proper statistical methods. That means a ton of the claims we hear about what AI can do are, frankly, unreliable.
And that raises a pretty massive question about what's coming next, doesn't it? Because to meet AI's absolutely insane demand for energy, tech companies are now seriously looking at moving their data centers into space, into low Earth orbit. So the question is, if we can't even get the safety testing right down here on the ground, are we remotely ready for that next frontier?
You know, when you boil it all down, it comes back to this one central challenge, doesn't it? In this massive global race for knowledge, for innovation, how do we keep building bridges so we can collaborate without accidentally leaving the back door wide open for the burglars? It's the tightrope we are all walking every single day. Thanks so much for joining us on The Roundup.